So it's good to be here with all of you in a beautiful Stockholm. It was nice to wake up this morning and see the sun actually come out. I think it must have decided to come out just for this event. This is my first European SharePoint conference, and I'm very privileged to be kicking things off this morning. So as we think about the European SharePoint conference, these things don't happen on their own. And so I want to just start by thanking the European SharePoint conference team, and particularly Tracy O'Connell, who the team has worked with over the last year or so as well. So let's give them a round of applause. We've got a lot to cover this morning in about the next hour, maybe hour and 15 minutes tops. We will discuss trends that are shaping the modern workplace. We'll give an update on recent progress that we've done in SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, and Office 365. We're going to provide an update on SharePoint Server 2016, and then we'll also provide a view into how we're thinking about the future of SharePoint. So should be a lot of fun. Before we get started, I really want to make sure, that we have active participation and engagement throughout the keynote. And to do that, we're going to use Bing Pulse. So for those of you who don't already have your mobile devices out, ready and going, why don't you go ahead and pull them out now. Of course, put them on listen mode, please. And if you go to this URL here, you'll come to the app. And there'll be just a couple of brief questions that you need to answer. And then from that point forward, you'll see thumbs up, thumbs down, and a bunch in between. And in fact, I understand you can actually give updates up to every 2 seconds. So keep the feedback going. And if there's something that you really like that you hear, please let us know. And then if there's things you don't like, let us know that too. So I want to start by providing a recap on Microsoft's new mission and strategy under our current CEO, Satya Nadella. And at the top level, our mission is to empower people and organizations to achieve more. And that really leads to our strategy, which is to build best-in-class platforms and productivity services for the mobile-first and cloud-first world. And I want to make just a couple of points about this. So the first is that when we think about mobility, it's not just about mobility of the device. It's really about enabling people on the go to have great experiences across their devices. So it's not just about mobility of the device, it's about mobility of the person. And then the second is we think about how our platforms and services are different than others in the industry. One of our primary focuses is to harmonize the different interests that exist, if you think about between end users and what they need, with IT and business leaders and developers, and to really try to bring those together instead of driving a wedge in between them and pushing them apart. And then to support this mission and strategy, we have 3 bold visions: reinvent productivity and processes, to build the intelligent cloud platform, and to create more personal computing. And if you think about SharePoint and Office 365, they really play a role across all 3 of those ambitions, but they're the heart and the soul of our ambition to reinvent productivity. And there's a new, renewed focus on SharePoint within Microsoft after, a couple of years ago, finding our way a little bit. About a year or so ago, from really Satya Nadella and our senior leadership team, there's a clear charter to innovate on SharePoint at the forefront of our ambition to reinvent productivity and as a key growth engine and driver for Office 365. And so because of that, I think it's just great news. The team is so excited to have Jeff Teper back leading our engineering team for SharePoint and OneDrive, and really leading the charge on taking SharePoint forward as a way to address sort of the key shifts that have happened in technology. Since SharePoint has been innovated on through the years, we've always evolved on industry trends, and there's some unique technology shifts, but there's also unique shifts that are happening that are shaping the modern workplace. And I want to spend a few minutes talking about what some of those shifts are. So change has always been constant. We sort of have begun to have to get used to change. What's different about now is just the rapid pace of that change. And if you think about it, just 10 to 15 years ago, the primary ways that we communicated with each other and got things done were email, phone, and fax. Fast forward to today, and it's a very different world. And these are some of the key shifts that are really shaping that modern workplace. The first one is a shift in not just thinking about acquiring and retaining customers, but it's really now becoming more about engaging and nurturing customers across the life cycle and turning those customers into fans and brand ambassadors. And that's one area where we will partner a lot with our friends over in Microsoft Dynamics CRM. The second is a shift from really traditional static hierarchical organizations to more dynamic networks and teams. The third one here is, and I'll spend more time on the dynamic teams and networks. The third one here is a shift from, frankly, information overload, coupled with the scarcity of not having the right information at the right time, to more accessible insights, where we're enabling people with more contextual and personalized insights driven by machine learning and predictive intelligence. And so things like you'll hear more about, like Delve and the Office Graph are good examples of that. And then if we look at the next shift here, it's really from siloed productivity, where we talk about it as sort of a me-centric enterprise, to a we-centric way of working together to get things done to create more collective value instead of sort of individual heroism, which used to be rewarded more in the past. And then you'll also see transactional systems as systems of engagement and intelligence. And this one is interesting because of the emergence of Internet of Things. So if you think about organizations are uncovering opportunities to embed hardware and sensors into their products and services, and therefore transforming into service-based companies. And I talk to customers across really all industries, whether it's retail, manufacturing, even government, who are going through this transformation. And it's also requiring them to transform their business processes. But the underlying systems to support that need to change as well, from being traditionally backwards-looking systems of record to more forward-looking systems of engagement and intelligence. And then the final shift here, I think, goes a little bit without saying, which is the topic of security. And security conversation has changed a lot from one that happens with CSOs and in the IT organization to really in the living room and in the boardroom. And this, of course, is due to the potential risk that a security breach can have both on the destruction of intellectual property, but also, worse yet, the potential destruction of a company's brand. So I want to go into a couple of these in a little bit more detail. The first is dynamic teams and networks. And really, this is all about speed and innovation. So if you think about traditional organizational hierarchies, information flows slowly from the top to the bottom. And with dynamic teams and networks and the advent of things like social communications, where there's much more openness and transparency, information flows more freely, and research shows that leads to higher productivity and speed of innovation. When we think about where this is going, one of the things that you can look at to sort of get a sense is millennials. So I happen to have a number of them working for me, and they collaborate a lot differently than we have in the past. And whether that's university students, whether that's recent graduates, whether that's millennials entering the workforce, they grew up not knowing a world without social media, without social networking, without mobile devices. And the way that they collaborate and communicate is very, very different. For example, they might be apt to just throw out an idea and use social media and social communications to crowdsource that idea and sort of bring it together with to fruition with their friends, with their colleagues. And they think very much more about the collective of getting things done with each other. And the reality is that we can't just ignore this. Turns out that by the year 2020, over half of the workforce will be millennials. So think about that for a moment. The option of just sort of staying the course and status quo is really not an option if we care about recruiting and retaining those millennial workers, but perhaps even more importantly, empowering them to do their best work. Another trend I want to drill into is the explosion of digital information and content. And it's just amazing that every 2 years, the amount of digital information on the planet is growing twofold. And by the year 2020, it's going to grow tenfold from where we're in 2013. So in 2013, we were at 4.4 zettabytes, and in 2020, we'll be at 44 zettabytes. How many people know what a zettabyte is? So just to put that into some kind of perspective, 1 zettabyte equals 1 billion terabytes, which is just unfathomable. Another point here is that Gartner and IDC estimate that 80% or more of that digital content within our organizations is unstructured data. So think email, documents, videos. And so the real question to be answered by organizations is, how do we manage all of this content effectively? And how do we surface the information in a way that is more contextual and personalized for individuals to help them deal with the problem of information overload and give them the ability to have the right information at the right time? And the answer is that we need a content collaboration platform that brings all of this together, that harmonizes end users and what they need for modern collaboration and to get things done, to have more personalized insights with the needs of the IT and business. It's a content collaboration platform that's built for people on the go, so they have great experiences across their devices as workers become increasingly mobile. It's a content platform that enables teams and networks with the tools that they need for modern collaboration. It's no longer about enterprise social being sort of a separate product or a separate thing, but more integrated as a part of how people collaborate together. And built for the enterprise with robust security and compliance built in, and flexible deployment models for on-premises deployments, cloud deployments, and hybrid deployments. And finally, a content collaboration platform, that's built for extensibility. Partners, our partners, many partners here, have been really the secret to our innovation cycle and will continue to be incredibly important as we think about delivering value to our customers. And so having a vibrant ecosystem as a part of the innovation cycle is key to an effective content collaboration platform. And this is really the journey that we're on with SharePoint and OneDrive, to be the modern content collaboration platform in the mobile-first, cloud-first, intelligence-powered world. And we're going to spend the rest of the session really talking about how we've made progress against aligned to this vision over the last 6 to 9 months with SharePoint Online, Office 365, SharePoint Server 2016, and then also providing a view about how we're thinking about taking SharePoint forward into the future. Let's start by looking at an example of a customer. We've got a lot of great customer stories, so it's hard to pick one to show you, but we thought this one was interesting. Booz Allen Hamilton is a global professional services firm. They have 25,000 employees, and if you think about services firms, a lot of those employees are out in the field working with their clients, and so they need mobile, modern collaboration tools to be successful. And Booz Allen Hamilton are using SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business and other parts of Office 365 in order to really transform the way that they're engaging with their employees, as well as transforming how they communicate and collaborate. So let's take a look at a video.
Booz Allen has a 100-year pedigree with customer intimacy. We bring technology to bear on their most difficult problems.
The greatest asset of Booz Allen Hamilton is its people. Approximately 65% of our staff are not in a Booz Allen office. They are either at a client site or working from a home location. We need our people to be able to collaborate and innovate seamlessly and securely on any device. Office 365 was ultimately chosen as our solution as it provided us the best combination of functionality, security, price, and accessibility for anything we looked at. Zone is our intranet. We originally set out on the creation of Zone to increase engagement amongst our staff. Zone is completely built on the Office 365 product set. We use SharePoint Online, OneDrive for Business, Office 365 Video, Delve. Our staff are very innovative. Settling on OneDrive for Business allowed us to offer them a solution that was seamless and integrated. The mobile capabilities we offer them is allowing them to work more effectively from wherever they are.
We're always working on documents collaboratively. The co-authoring really helped us make sure that we didn't have a lot of version control issues. Our speed to market was increased just by using OneDrive for Business. By moving to more cloud options, we're able to stay more current, provide those options to our staff even before they're asking for them.
Our partnership with Microsoft is teaching organizations to be ready for what's next. Microsoft is what's next.
Great example. It's customers like Booz Allen Hamilton and a lot of the customers here in the room and partners as well that continue to drive the growth for SharePoint and OneDrive. When we think about growth, it's actually changed a lot in just the last year at Microsoft when we used to talk a lot about sort of revenue growth, and we still have to do that, of course, with our financial community. But internally, the key metrics that we look at are really now more about these things that internally we call MAU, WOW, and DAO. You don't need to know what all those mean, but what's the important point is culturally the change towards usage and adoption as a key way to measure success versus sort of revenue. And so as we look at sort of the 75,000 customers that we have today, we look at the 160 million users, the most important thing we look at is monthly active usage and daily active usage, because we know that customers aren't getting value from Microsoft by purchasing our products and services. They're not really even getting value if they deploy. It's really about adoption and usage that equals value. And so that's the key sort of driver for us. The good news is that in just the last year, we've had 200% increase in monthly active usage for SharePoint Online and OneDrive. We work really, really hard to get information and data through research and focus groups to understand how people are using SharePoint on premises. But in the cloud, we have access to that real time through telemetry. And so it's really also changed the way that we can connect and understand how our products and services are being used. When we think about growth, the other thing we think about is content growth. So there's the number of users, and then there's how deeply are they using it. And that may be monthly, weekly, daily, but also in terms of how much content is being stored and is being used. And here we have a 500% year-over-year content growth in SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business. And those are spread roughly evenly across the scenarios of OneDrive team sites in SharePoint Online, as well as portals. And on the area of portals, the biggest growth is coming from some of our newer next-gen portals like Delve and Office 365 Video. And then, of course, ecosystem growth. And again, as I mentioned, our partner community, our developers have been and will continue to be the lifeblood of delivering value to customers. And we now have over how many? Over a million developers, which is great. And then we also have a $7 to $8 billion ecosystem. And this is important not just because it shows that the ecosystem is alive and thriving, but really the contribution to the economy. If you think about how big that ecosystem is, that $7 to $8 billion. So with that, thank you. My time is up. And I would like to bring up Jeff Teper, who is our Corporate Vice President for SharePoint and OneDrive. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Seth.
Yeah.
And thank you all. It's fantastic to be back with the community. It really is a privilege. I think a few folks in the room have remember me when I didn't have quite so much gray hair, and neither did you, and it's great to see some old friends. But it's also great to be back. I had the good fortune when Satya Nadella came in as CEO, he asked me to run the strategy group at Microsoft. And I said, isn't that for consultants and bankers? I'm sort of an engineer. I like to build stuff. He said, that's exactly why I need your help. And I said, I'd do it for a year or so, but then I should do something different, because I worked on SharePoint for a long time and then Office 365. He said, yeah, we'll worry about that later. And so the year came up, and I said, it's time. I want to go back and build something. How about this? How about that? He said, no. You need to go back to SharePoint. So here I am, and very, very excited. I have to say, folks have interacted with the team. We've got a fabulous team across OneDrive and SharePoint, and we've got some really exciting plans. I'm going to spend most of the time this morning showing you what's in process, what we're working on, things that'll ship in the next 2-4 months. We're going to show a bunch of demos on that. But then I'll come back at the end, and we'll talk about some of the things we're planning for the next year. So let me first talk about what we're doing with OneDrive. We've had a really exciting set of announcements on September 30th for OneDrive for Business, where we're introducing a new common sync technology that's dramatically more performant and reliable. That's available in preview now. It's got, besides performance and reliability, it's got selective sync, so you can take down to each device exactly the content you want. Yes, and that's available for not only Windows, but the Mac, because we know that a great OneDrive sync client on the Mac is a key request from people for OneDrive for Business. Next is we have a fabulous set of mobile apps that are out there for Windows Phone, iOS, and Android. These are getting better each and every quarter. As part of that announcement we did back in September, we announced the ability to take things offline in Android, the ability to edit a PDF right from within OneDrive on iOS. We're going to swap those so both clients, including Windows Phone, will get all those capabilities. And really, quite proud of these. These are 4-star plus mobile apps, and I don't know if folks are using them. They're pretty indispensable to me. Anywhere I can go, I can get access to my documents. Next thing that we announced at that point that we've been deploying throughout Office 365 is a much simpler, faster browser interface. It runs on client-side JavaScript, served off a CDN, wicked fast, really responsive, super simple, and kind of the model for a lot of the things we're going to do architecturally with OneDrive and SharePoint over the next year. And so far, the feedback on that new web-based UI and the sharing experience has been great. And then lastly, we introduced a set of new IT controls, both for things like setting policy on what domains or users can share externally, as well as new auditing and reporting tools that will be coming online this calendar year. So all those things are in preview now. By the end of the calendar year, they'll all be out and available to all Office 365 users. So a big set of updates coming for OneDrive for Business. Next is SharePoint Server, or sorry, SharePoint Online. We'll get to SharePoint Server in a second. As Seth talked about, each quarter we're introducing new things for SharePoint Online. One of my favorite things to do is every day, literally, go to blogs.office.com and see all the new things that are coming out. One of the biggest sets of things we've done is improve the collaboration experience across Office and SharePoint Online. That includes things like simplified sharing, the ability to send what we'd call modern attachments in Outlook, attached from Outlook, and it puts a link in to OneDrive for Business or SharePoint so people can collaborate with that in the single version of the truth, as well as new real-time co-authoring that first comes out in Word 2016, but will ultimately spread across all the apps. All this to make sure SharePoint continues to be the leader in collaboration. The next area is groups. For those of you who don't know, we've got this groups concept, which is basically a collection of people that can be used across all sorts of resources in Office 365. And we've taken some initial steps, but you'll see a lot more here. So initially what we've done is let you have conversations within a group, and that shows up in the Outlook web app and in the Outlook 2016 client, as well as a new set of mobile groups apps. And each of those groups get a document library that under the covers is SharePoint, but will expose more and more of that SharePoint team site functionality as we go forward. So groups is the collaboration glue across Office 365. Next, Seth talked about videos. We think one of the neat things that people want to do in modern intranets is have a video portal. This is super hard to do on premises. Set up streaming and codecs and conversion and upload and so forth. We automate it all for you in Office 365. Between SharePoint is the front end for this video portal and the Azure Streaming Media Services, and we'll show you that in a little bit. And the last area of enhancement for SharePoint Online is Delve in the Office Graph. This was something that I was really proud to work on a couple years ago when we were gestating the idea about how we can get search to be more intelligent and more automatic. And we came up with this idea of we're not just going to index all your documents in SharePoint Online and OneDrive, but we're going to inform the relevance, not just by word counting, but by the signals of collaborative activity. And we're going to surface that content to you proactively, as opposed to having you always go and search for it. And so that birthed Delve in the Office Graph. And there's all sorts of new capabilities for finding documents and people coming out there. Just recently, we talked about a set of announcements for new blogging and profile capabilities, again, built by the SharePoint team, surfacing in Delve and Office Graph, but eventually cutting across more and more functionality in SharePoint. So that's some of the highlights of things that are coming fairly soon in OneDrive for Business and SharePoint Online. I'm really excited to bring up Bill Baer, who's going to demo some of those to you. Welcome, Bill.
Thank you, Jeff. It's great to be here in Stockholm, bright and early in the morning. Let's go ahead and take a look at some of what Jeff had just discussed with us this morning. So bear with me as we get started here from a demo perspective. So generally, when you think about collaboration, the way it tends to happen is it requires two things, an individual and an idea. And OneDrive is where we see those ideas fostered. OneDrive gives birth to those ideas. And in order to help individuals create content and cultivate content and move forward with content, we had to come up with an easier way for them to do it. Not only, as Jeff said, did we modernize the user interface, did we make it faster and more responsive and serve content quicker, but we also made it easier to use. So for those that haven't seen some of the changes that we've made in OneDrive, we'll just have a quick look at some of these. So for example, here in OneDrive, I can look at a document. By clicking on that document, you'll notice we have a new command surface. That's different from what you've seen before. So if I quickly want to get information about a document, you can see we have a new preview panel. Not only do I get a preview of the document itself, but I get a glimpse into who the document's shared with, who created the document, who cultivated that information. So the user interface has not only gotten faster, but it's become more intuitive to help individuals work with information. One of the other things that you may have noticed that Jeff talked about was this idea of groups. And we recognize today that the new workforce, it's mobile, it's social, it's about getting things done. And you need a place to cultivate content and conversations at the same time. And that's where we see this concept of groups come in. So here we have a group, Contoso Finance, that we can work into. And within that group itself, not only do we have files that are created within the group, but we also have files that have been shared with the group. And through OneDrive and groups, we've made that concept of sharing easy. So when that individual that creates the idea is ready to share information more broadly to provide greater mobility from a business perspective, to share information more broadly, and to make it accessible to more people, we've made it easy to just share information with groups. So for this example, I can share with the Contoso Finance group, and that content not only remains here in OneDrive, but it's now shared with my group in order to foster greater collaboration. So information becomes more and more accessible to individuals. Not only is it easier to work with, not only is it easier to cultivate, but it's easier to discover as well. Groups also come with conversations. And that's the idea of cultivating content and conversations together. So within the group construct itself, I can also have conversations. It's putting conversations and content closer together to drive greater engagement around the content that individuals create. But that's all about content creation and curation. You still need an intelligent way to discover content. And that's where Delve comes in. It provides a fabric through which you can discover contextually relevant content that's important to you and important to the work you do. So here we are in Delve. As you can see, we have our boards. Our boards are representative of content that is relevant to me, with the prioritized content at the top, and then lower down content that may be less relevant to what I do. Through Delve itself, not only can I discover content that I'm creating, that I'm cultivating, that's stored in OneDrive, that's stored in SharePoint Online, that's stored in Office 365 Video, but I can also quickly work with colleagues such as Alex. And I can see what they're working on, information that I have access to that they've shared with me previously. In addition to being able to discover information that Alex has cultivated and created, we've also got a great new profile view. And through the profile view, I can learn more about individuals within my organization, as well as the work that they're working on. So from a discovery perspective, we've made it really easy to gather that contextually relevant information. In addition to that, you can also discover information by executing a search query. So in this case, I can look for a company profit forecast. And the great part about that is not only does it discover information in OneDrive, not only does it discover information in SharePoint Online, but it also enables discovery through Office 365 Video. So for this example, I can quickly discover and access videos, and I can stream those not only to a desktop browser, but to mobile devices as well. And that's been one of the difficult parts on premises is video. Really coming up with a solution that drives video not only through the browser, but also makes it responsive and makes it work across devices. But Delve's not only about helping me manage my information. In the future, Delve will help you manage your time. And that's one of the great aspects of analytics and machine learning, because it can be applied to so many scenarios. So here's another view of Delve, and I can look at myself. But from a management of time perspective, we're going to introduce a new capability that we call analytics. And analytics is what helps me manage my time. So through here in our analytics pane, what you can see is I can quickly understand the time I'm spending both in internal and external meetings over a course of time. I can also categorize that information, or Delve categorizes that information for me. So I can see the amount of time I'm spending in mail versus the amount of time I'm spending in meetings, and the amount of time that I'm truly focused. And this is what really helps me collaborate better with individuals within my organization. A great example of which is I can look at my top connections. Who am I spending the majority of my time collaborating with over periods of time? What's my network velocity? In addition to that, who should I connect with more frequently, or who should I re-engage with? And one of the great aspects of this is it provides an opportunity for me to work with individuals in a broader context, because I know who I'm engaged with, who I'm working with more frequently than others, and who I should re-engage with to foster greater collaboration. So if we take it all the way back to this idea that individuals create information, then they foster that through content and conversations that are cultivated together through groups. We apply discovery through machine learning and predictive analytics that helps me manage my information, but we also can get to a point with this new intelligent fabric to where it can also help me manage my time. So effectively, what you have is a well-rounded collaboration suite that's not only great on a desktop browser, but for example, as Jeff talked about, we've got a great set of apps that we can use on mobile devices as well. So I'm not always on a laptop. I'm not always in a desktop browser such as Edge. I'm traveling today. And one of the great aspects of that is no matter what device I may have, from the largest form factor down to the smallest form factor, I'm able to continue to work with individuals and engage with those individuals. So here we have our Contoso Finance Group again, and as you can see, we've got a great view not only into content and conversations, but we can also access OneNote, we can look at notifications, and we can discover information as well. So with that said, I want to turn it back over to Jeff, and we'll have a quick look at some other demos as well. And it is lonely up here.
Thanks, Phil. Don't go very far. We will need you in just a bit here. One of the things folks have asked me a lot about since I've come back is how to think about groups and delve in the Office graph in the context of SharePoint and so forth. And I really think, as Bill described, groups in the Office graph are sort of this glue underpinning the whole Office suite. When we used to talk about Office, we'd talk about copy and paste in the ribbon is the thing that made Word and Excel and PowerPoint the whole greater than the sum of the parts. This groups ingredient and this delve in Office graph ingredient is really things that will connect Outlook and Exchange and OneDrive and SharePoint and many more parts of the Office 365 suite and make it, as Bill said, more intelligent and more collaborative. And you'll see us build a lot on that. Next, I'm going to talk about the server. We are committed to continuing to be in the business of releasing servers for SharePoint. Absolutely. We released one for Exchange 2016, just a little bit ago. We're working hard on the next version of SharePoint Server. As we've talked about over the last couple of years, we're cloud first, so things show up first in Office 365, and then we take them down and package them into the server release. And so I'm just going to highlight a couple of things that are in the 2016 server. First is we've taken some of the user experience elements, things that were existing at the point that we literally forked the code a few months ago to put them in the server. What you see here is a mobile UI that lets you browse information on your SharePoint sites with a browser-based rendering that makes sense on a phone. There's a bunch of other user experience simplicity enhancements that we took from the cloud and put them in the server product. Next, that we've done a lot of work around security and compliance in the infrastructure, but also IT-facing tools for governance and policy management and auditing and insights and so forth. And one of the biggest ones that people asked us for is this idea of data loss prevention, where you could set rules about information that you don't want to have leak off your SharePoint server sites. The next to last area is this concept that we've talked about of a cloud-inspired infrastructure. Let me stop for a second and explain a little bit how we used to release SharePoint. We'd plan for about 4 to 6 months. Then we'd code with some stabilization miles interleaved for about a year. And then we'd have about a 9-month or so beta process where we'd get broad feedback and testing. And during that beta process, we'd run in production, in addition to our own extensive testing, but we'd literally run in production, in some cases 9 to 12 months before release, SharePoint Server on our 100 servers running SharePoint in 100,000+ sites for Microsoft employees. And then we'd get customers and partners in the beta program, and we'd watch to make sure that we got a few dozen of those going into production before release and we sign off. And that's how we ship software. Now that code goes to the cloud first, and it gets stabilized. Instead of 100 servers on the Microsoft network, it runs on almost 30,000 servers in 19 data centers in Office 365. Instead of running on a few dozen databases, we're running on 20,000 SQL Server databases. All that code is exercised under extreme stress and load, and then we take a subset of it down to the server product, where we do additional testing and beta process and so forth. So in many cases, the code is hardened dramatically more than it ever was. And in fact, just the operational learning of when it comes times to write the documentation, best practices, and so forth, this comes from our team running a world-class 7x24 365 service that over the last 6 months has averaged 99.99% availability. So much higher quality product as a result of the code running in the cloud first. The last area is hybrid. We know that not everybody can go to the cloud. Some will stay on premises, but most customers will go to the cloud in a staged way. I think, I don't know if Seth shared the data, but about 80% of our customers say over the next 2 to 3 years in SharePoint that they will be in the cloud. And many of them will go step by step. Maybe they'll start with OneDrive for Business. Maybe they'll start with half their team sites and leave their highly customized portals for on-premises. Different people will do different things based on different business requirements. Some customers will put their extranet sites in the cloud. And so what we really did is build hybrid into this release of 2016, as well as some of the hybrid services in Office 365. This used to be really complicated before. The white papers were, constantly being updated, 100 pages long. And we really tried to make this extremely simple, where you're setting up a few switches and you can get hybrid capabilities in the cloud. So to show us some of those, Bill, why don't you take us on a quick tour of the server and hybrid capabilities?
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the great things about this particular release is we're enabling you to take advantage of cloud innovation through your on-premises servers. So for those customers who may have data sovereignty or data sensitivity concerns, a significant investment in customization, or perhaps you have corporate and or regulatory compliance concerns, we're enabling you not only to retain control of your information on premises, but also enabling you to take advantage of cloud innovation. Innovation that's backed by numerous standards that we adhere to inside of Office 365. So what we have here is an example of SharePoint 2016 on premises. But before we get into hybrid, one of the things I also want to talk about is this idea of accruing cloud innovation back to on premises. Something that Jeff talked about is how we build in the cloud, and then we look for opportunities to bring some of that back to our on-premises customers. A great example of which is in Office 365, we introduced a great feature for those that like data loss prevention and compliance that we call sensitive information types, or classification IDs. And the way classification IDs work is it's a simple construct, and it uses proximity scans and pattern matching to help you discover sensitive information that's stored within your SharePoint environment. So this is an example of a sensitive information type query that I've composed in SharePoint Server 2016. And because we're here in Stockholm, I've decided to use Sweden passport number and national ID from a discovery perspective. So here we are in our eDiscovery Center, and as you can see from a query perspective, it's not the simple free text query that you used to see in eDiscovery. This one uses this concept of classification IDs, and as you can see, I've specified two here in my query, Sweden passport number and Sweden national ID. So if I go ahead and execute this query across my SharePoint environment, I should get a result. And as you can see from a query statistics perspective, we discovered a document that contains a Sweden passport number. In addition to that, we also have a link to the document itself. So what I'll go ahead and do is just copy this link, and let's have a peek inside of there and see what this sensitive information type query discovered. So to avoid opening it in the client, let's just go ahead and open it in Office Online Server. So this is one of the things that we've recently shipped with SharePoint 2016 IT Preview. And as you can see, here's the Sarah Davis interview logistics file that our sensitive information type discovered. But not only are sensitive information types intelligent in that they use proximity scans and pattern matching, it also is capable of interpreting differences in language as well. So as you can see here, this document doesn't contain anything called a Sweden passport number or a Sweden national ID. Instead, it's understood the Swedish term for those concepts. As you can see, the document contains Schengen visa, and it has a number that matches the pattern. So not only were we able to perform a proximity scan through a simple classification ID to discover Schengen visa, which is the term that we wanted, but we were also able to do pattern matching. And the pattern matching understands that if it is a Sweden passport number, it should be of 8 characters or 8 digits. So it is able to discover that information and present it to me very easily. And this is a great example of something that we introduced in the cloud, first in Exchange Online and later to SharePoint Online, but that we're also giving to our customers through our SharePoint Server 2016 release. And over the course of time, you'll see this evolve into hybrid scenarios as well, where you can execute DLP queries across environments, both on-premises and in Office 365. All of this is built on Enterprise Search, our fast search engine, the same thing that enables us to power the Office Graph. So let's go ahead and take a look at search as it exists on premises. So I can execute as pretty typical in earlier versions of SharePoint, a simple query on premises and discover information. And the idea of executing a query, it's a very conscious decision. You have to specify a keyword. Using that keyword, you later refine information, and eventually you get to what you want. And machine learning is what enables you to find that contextually relevant information. So as you can see here, we have some documents on premises, Fabricam Pharmaceuticals, and more. But what we've done is we've introduced a new hybrid search capability that unifies your content across both on-premises and Office 365. So as you can see, when I click the Sites tile in my SharePoint 2016 environment through our new hybrid sites design, I'm now in Office 365, very seamless. Not only that, I'm getting recommendations for sites to follow, both on-premises as well as in my Office 365 environment. So let's go ahead and search the same keyword. And as you can see, what we'll receive is we'll receive documents from both on-premises and online. The key difference here is these documents are not only representative of documents across both environments, but it's a monolithic result set, unlike the previous version of hybrid search that I can refine independently. I can also preview content that exists both on-premises as well as in Office 365. So here we have content on premises, and here we have content in the cloud. But the great part about this is it also opens up the Office graph to our on-premises customers. So effectively what it does is because we've unified your search index in Office 365, not only can we give you a monolithic result set, but we can also deliver to you through the cloud the power of the Office graph. So I can, again, search for Fabricam, and as you can see, I'm getting results back from Office Delve from my on-premises as well as my Office 365 environment. And I can perform many of the same actions as you could online as well. So I can add content to a board. I can bookmark content by adding it as a favorite. And it also provides me the new Delve profile experience. But what's even better than that is not only do I get capability that's accrued to me from Office 365, but it also opens up the opportunity for me to gain access to the mobile apps as well. So for our on-premises customers, not only do you get the power of the Office Graph and Office Delve through hybrid enabled through the cloud, but you also get the power of the rich applications we provide across iOS, Android, and Windows Phone devices. So as you can see here, we're in the Office Delve app on an iPad device, and I have content representative of that which both exists on premises as well as in Office 365. And over the course of time, we're going to introduce more and more hybrid scenarios. And effectively, you can think about us not bringing your business to the cloud as much as we're bringing the cloud to your business. So there's great opportunities ahead for us from a hybrid perspective. And we're going to make it easier as well. As Jeff talked about, we have a new hybrid scenario picker. And we're making it easier and easier for you to adopt hybrid and bring cloud innovation back to your data centers. So I just wanted to thank everybody again for being here today. Thank you, Jeff. It's been great to be here in Stockholm. Thanks.
Great. Thanks. That demo that Bill just showed is really one of my favorite things, that when I've got a couple of minutes when I'm in line at lunch or I'm walking between buildings to bring up the Delve mobile app and see what people are working on in the SharePoint team. And so that we see the content they've posted publicly on OneDrive or within teams I'm a member of. And you can serendipitously browse through people and see who's working with who and see the content. And the fact that we could take that content that exists on premises and leave it on premises if that's what you want to do, but index it in the cloud with all this machine learning and then project it out onto a mobile device that you can literally look at in seconds, I think is a pretty magical experience that nobody else can do. There's other people who've done things that are a subset of that, but you have to move everything to the cloud. I think this hybrid approach we've taken is pretty clever, and we've gotten a bunch of great feedback on it. I think next slide is going to be a bit of news, if I recall from the rehearsal, that SharePoint 2016 Beta 2 is going to ship this month in November. We are finishing it up over the next couple weeks. We have Thanksgiving in the United States, so we want to be done before that for sure. And so you can sort of mark that on your calendar. And that will be the final public beta of the server, and we're going to work pretty hard to finish it up from there. It'll be 99% feature complete. There's one or two things we might get in the final release, but pretty much what you see is what you get in the 2016 server, along with the hybrid services that are available. And so let me transition and talk a little bit more about hybrid, because I think this is a place where, to be frank, so much of the industry is shifting to the cloud, where we can get you more value to your users faster than ever before. We can innovate faster, but we can also protect information better. That if you look at the things we do in our data centers, our operations, our encryption, the security and compliance and auditing, really the data is safer in the cloud than in almost any corporate data center. But we know that people aren't necessarily ready for that, or there might be laws that prevent data from leaving a certain country. And so that's why we want to provide really industry leadership in hybrid flexibility, whether it's setting up menu choices where some are on premises or some in the cloud. Perfect example of that is a lot of companies are using OneDrive for Business, even though they're phasing in their team sites to the cloud, because they've just seen so many of their users putting their sensitive corporate information in consumer services in the cloud, and they need an answer right away. And that's what OneDrive for Business does. It gives you encryption. It gives you mobile device management, e-discovery, auditing, et cetera, et cetera. You might have a service like Yammer that you plug into the cloud. And then as we go along the spectrum, there's things where there's more intelligence or data interaction. Things like Delve in the Office Graph that can be powered by hybrid search. Things like some of the more advanced compliance features like e-discovery, where, as Bill showed, you can do security and compliance spanning data in the cloud or on premises. So we really want to be quite flexible, and it'll only be a subset of things that are the cloud only. Because of all the scale and sophistication of the Office Graph, we want to have a subset of that on premises. But what we've done that I think is pretty clever is make hybrid search work with the Office Graph in the cloud. So we're very excited, and I know there's some sessions here this week that go into more details on the different models to adopt the cloud in a hybrid approach. And again, we want to give a lot of choice there. And Bill didn't mention it. Some of the things we're doing actually go back to SharePoint Server 2013. That hybrid search feature does work with the 2013 server. You don't actually have to upgrade to 2.16 for that. There's many new capabilities in the latest server, but where we could give you more flexibility relatively easily, we did. So that's hybrid. The last thing I want to talk about in things in progress already is developer empowerment. SharePoint, as Seth talked about, is a very flexible data platform, lots of information in SharePoint, but it's also a user experience platform where people build sites and applications plugging things in. And we want to make both those use cases much simpler. So we have a spectrum of tools that we're providing, everything from power users in .NET and C# to a lot of what you've seen over the last year in Microsoft broadly, but in particular in SharePoint, is opening up to various open source techniques. We love the fact that SharePoint in the .NET ecosystem is stronger than ever, but we know there's a lot of people coming to the cloud from other ecosystems. They may want to program in Node or Ruby or PHP on the server. They want to use a different JavaScript framework, Angular or React or something like that. And we want to be very, very open on that. And you've seen us do things like provide some of the samples up on GitHub in open source. And then the last end of the spectrum from the power developers is people who want to build no-code solutions. And there we've gotten some great no-code or low-code solutions. We've got some great partners, including sponsors here, like K2 and Nintex, who we really love the things that they're doing on top of SharePoint and work very closely with them so they can keep innovating. So there's never one size fits all in development tools, and we want to empower them all. To make sure this is easier and easier, we're working very hard on simplifying our APIs. Some of you have given us feedback that some of the legacy of SharePoint surfaces through in the modern REST APIs, and we want to streamline that a bit better. And so one of the first steps we've taken is this Files API that cuts across OneDrive and SharePoint as part of the graph.microsoft.com namespace that makes it much simpler for a developer to just get up and running very quickly on SharePoint. And lastly, we've been improving our guidance in patterns and practices. Again, this is a place where, because we have thousands and thousands of applications built on SharePoint Online in the cloud, we're learning a lot about the performance and reliability and extensibility and upgradability of those, and that allows us to give very clear guidance on how to build applications that run either on-premises in the cloud, and we're continuing to enhance that. So those are some of the things that are, again, things that are working in process. Probably 80% of the team's occupied on that. I want to transition now to what we're working on next. We're in the planning stages of this. This is a place where we love feedback on what you'd love to see us tackle next. These are things that you'll see in more the 6 to 12-month time horizon from us. And again, we're in the early stages of planning this. This is all building out, as Seth said, the modern content collaboration platform. So we think about OneDrive and SharePoint addressing the spectrum, everywhere from a student working on their homework to the largest organization in the world transforming their intranet for the mobile world. That's what we're trying to do in OneDrive and SharePoint. And so let me talk about a few of the areas that we are working on in our planning. The first is focusing on people on the go, as Seth talked about. Making sure you can have access to all your information anywhere. And so we've taken this first step in these unified OneDrive mobile apps and unified OneDrive sync engine. We want to connect that to SharePoint so you can take your SharePoint content with you wherever you go, on a PC and a Mac, or on a mobile device in a much more seamless way. And so we'll be connecting SharePoint into that OneDrive experience over the next bit here. We want to make it easier to share that content in a secure, trusted way, so that you can share things with maybe a one-time code that's authenticated against a mobile device, and you know that after it's been accessed once, it disappears. And so bringing together our device management and rights management capabilities and making sharing a lot simpler. We also want to make it easy to publish from OneDrive to SharePoint. Probably the #1 thing that that everybody does that's not a feature of the product is you work on something in OneDrive in sort of a draft form, and then you want to share it with your team. And people may sort of drag and drop or save to the desktop and upload and so forth. We think you should just be able to click and say, make this available to my team. It's something people do all the time. That's an example of something we're trying to work on to make file sharing and accessing information everywhere easier. And we've cut across there some of the themes of connecting OneDrive and SharePoint. That's a big one. Bill showed in a couple of different ways Delve in the Office Graph and how it's intelligent, and it's great. You saw the Delve mobile app and the Delve web UI. We kind of think that you should be able to get access to that from right within the OneDrive app and within the SharePoint site. So some of that Delve intelligence coming right within the native OneDrive and SharePoint experience is something we're thinking about very carefully as we evolve the SharePoint and OneDrive UI. So those are some of the things for mobility and access to information. Next, we want to focus on teamwork and collaboration across the organization and beyond with extranets and things like that. So we're going to modernize the team site user experience. Again, one of the things that I want to make clear is it's not team sites versus groups. It's groups make team sites better. And so we're actually using a team site under the covers. But we're going to add a much enhanced team site user experience that you'll see from us that brings in the group activities, that brings in Delve, and makes that experience richer and more intuitive on the web and on mobile. And so modernizing team sites and connecting them to groups is a key theme for us. Enterprise content management is really the core workload of SharePoint. People use this for all sorts of extreme content management needs. And we want to make it a lot simpler to navigate and organize and add processes to large volumes of information. And we've got some very clever ideas in the lab, actually, of things that will help people sort around documents that I think nobody else has done before. And so we're working on that area, and we're eager to hear from people the pain points they have about large volumes of content that they'd like us to tackle. And the last area, and the one that perhaps I'm most excited about, is this area of an out-of-box mobile intranet. SharePoint sort of invented the out-of-box intranet 10-ish so years ago, where you get team sites and portals all linked together through a common fabric. We want to do that again on the phone. We know our UI is not responsive out of the box, and that takes work, and there's all sorts of guidelines we've given people on how to do that. But we think you should just fire up your phone and browse your entire intranet, collaborative spaces, published spaces, and plug in content to that with custom application development and have that all just work. And we're working on the plans for that pretty hard. We're very, very excited about that space. Next area is IT. Clearly, we're focused very hard on enterprise requirements. A lot of work going on here, whether it's in Office 365, the compliance and security and governance there. But really what we want to do is make sure that the work we're doing in SharePoint doesn't just empower users to collaborate more effectively. We're also empowering developers to have greater governance and insights they ever had before with any product, including any previous release of SharePoint. So the ability to set policies on what information could be accessed who, when, on what device, in language human beings actually understand, as opposed to access control lists, which are sort of a throwback 20 or so years in computer science. We want to make it easier for people to set policies on access to information. The next area is analytics. Bill showed very briefly this concept of Delve Analytics for your own personal information. Where am I managing my time, and how could I do better? We're going to take that same analytics technology and bring it into SharePoint so you can understand how your content's performing, how your team's performing, and to help you optimize that. We're really excited about bringing that org analytics capability across the suite. And lastly, of course, we are committed to shipping new server releases and new hybrid support. So we're going to do another server release, and we're still working on the details about exactly how that'll play out, but we're committed to server updates after 2016 ships. No danger of doing anything other than that. And we're really excited about giving people more and more flexibility in hybrid migration, so you have the choice about how exactly you get to the cloud and when. So a lot of focus there on IT features for the enterprise. Last area is developers. We love developers in SharePoint. We've got some great ideas how to make development simpler and faster. I talked about this flexible platform with a spectrum of tools. People have asked us to make it easier to customize SharePoint, again, with no code, right out of the box. We've got some great ideas how to do that. Again, as we think about how to make SharePoint more mobile, we also think about how to make SharePoint customizable in a mobile world, and we're going to do that. But we're continued to be committed to SharePoint as a hardcore development platform for people who want to do that. Again, whether it's .NET or any other ecosystem, you will see us do things to really embrace flexibility and choice in building apps on SharePoint and integrating information on SharePoint. And on the time to market, one of the things we need to do, I mentioned the simpler API that we've got for files. We're going to take that concept more and more across the suite. We're going to have some new things. One that we're working on is support for webhooks across SharePoint and OneDrive so that you can register for events in an open way that integrates with all sorts of integration broker approaches people are using in the cloud. And then a client-side development framework for SharePoint and OneDrive where you can build these very responsive applications that are highly performant. Some of the things you saw when Bill demoed the OneDrive for Business UI and the Video UI and the Delve UI, we've actually been working on some of these techniques under the covers for a bit, and hardcore JavaScript developers have probably been paying attention to things we're doing. They've really informed our technical approach we're going to take to make the SharePoint experience fantastic, responsive, and most importantly, easy to customize for the next generation of intranets and extranets. So those are some of our investment areas. We're going to cover a lot more of that in the coming months. Meantime, we want certainly folks to focus on what's available today or coming soon, the things that Bill showed you. And with that, I'm going to wrap up and, again, profoundly thank everybody here for being part of the SharePoint community. We really appreciate all the support you've given us. We really are eager to get your feedback, so please fill out the paper, as Wim said, or the mobile app, whichever you want to do. We don't care. We'd love feedback, and you want to grab me at the conference. I'll be here the next couple days. Anybody from our team, we'd love to hear from you, what you're doing with SharePoint, your feedback. And with that, I'll close and say thank you and have a fantastic SharePoint conference. Thanks very much.